It has been said that average people want you to stay average. Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast, the podcast designed to challenge you to break the mold that average has on the world. Each episode offers insights directly from those who choose to break average every day. Now, for the latest insights, here are your hosts, Paul Gustafson and Rick Morris.
Welcome to the Breaking Average podcast. I am Paul Gustafson, and I'm with my co-host, Rick Morris. Hey, Rick, how are you, man?
Hey, Paul. Super excited for today, man. Ready to go.
I am excited, too. We've been having fun. This will be week 4, actually. We're just pulling a book off the shelf, and it's not just a book off the shelf. We actually you and I spent a few minutes early on just picking 16 phenomenal books. And so this was one that I was a little bit skeptical of, but I am pleasantly surprised. I really like this book a lot. So can you share with everybody the book that we picked? Because you really picked this book, and I'm so glad you did. What is the book, and why should everybody read it?
Well, first of all, if I didn't pick this book, I'd be in big trouble. So fair warning for everybody. The author of this book is now my boss. So, but that's not why I picked the book. I love this book. It came out in 2017. But Brendon Burchard's High Performing Habits, or High Performance Habits. And really, this is about the habits of high performing people. And I'll tell you what spoke to me more than anything, Paul, just the thing that hooked me into this book before you even start to read it is a story that Brendon shares. He shares an email that he got from one of his coaching clients. And so a lot of our listeners are coaches. A lot of our listeners are people that have gone through personal growth. And, sometimes when you read something and it's just the exact time you need to hear something. That was the experience I had when I read this. We talked about disc profiles and strength finders and Myers-Briggs and all these things. And in fact, if you pick up my book from 2008, the very first chapter of my book on project management that works is called Understanding You. And I think it's so important that you do disc profiles and strength finders and all these things so that you can understand how you're wired, how you communicate, how you see the world, how others see the world. And really your first 6-7 years of a personal growth journey is all self, driven and trying to understand why you make certain decisions. And the email is kind of tongue in cheek, and I don't want to, but the guy was so funny, and he was like, I can tell you that I like the color orange over blue, and my spirit animal's a lion, and all this stuff. Right? He was like, I know myself better than I've ever known myself before, but that doesn't translate into success. I'm still failing. And so the question he posed to Brendon that started him down this path was, I don't know what to do. And that was the thing. He's like, I know who I am, and I know how I react, and I know how I communicate. I know how I should treat others, but that doesn't tell me what to do to bring success. That tells me how to act in success, but not what to do in success. And so really this book is a tremendous amount of research.
It is.
That is, it's all research backed, that really comes up with these high performing habits. What are the habits? What are the things that people do that are high performers that allows them to break average? And that's why we're talking about this book, Paul.
Yeah. And I really so glad that you picked this book. And I've gone through it over the last couple of days, and I'm just like, whoa, how come I haven't really read this book further? And let me just say something, and this will help everybody. Rick, do you look at Amazon reviews?
Of course.
Yeah, I do too. I usually pick whatever I'm going to get based on the reviews that I see. But not every review is fair. Not every review is right. And so I got caught off guard. I'm just going to be frank with you, Rick, and everybody, all our listeners and viewers. I got caught off guard with a review that kind of threw me off a few years back when I first got this book. I got the book, and usually somebody gifted it to me, and I was thankful for it very much. And then, but I didn't read it. Why? Because when I went to evaluate the books that I wanted to mastermind that year, and I looked at it, there was a review that caught my attention that threw me off. And I took lots of great reviews, by the way, but that one negative review just threw me off. and I just put it aside. I'm like, nah, I'm not going to read it. Nope, that person, what they're sharing there, that just doesn't connect with me. Well, that person was wrong. That person was wrong. And they totally missed the whole element of this thing. And I'm glad you started with that story, right? And I love the premise of this book. Love the subtitle, How Extraordinary People Become That Way. I mean, think about it. What a greater thing. There's nothing greater to study if you're talking about, we talked about influencers, high performance influencers last week. We're talking about high performance successful people this time, right? Same kind of category of folks. So I think our pairings of books is actually working out pretty well. There's nothing better to study than how extraordinary people do what they do. And that's why we do the Breaking Average podcast. We want to know, how do breaking average folks do what they do? So this book is perfectly suited for this podcast and for all our listeners and viewers out there. So glad you did it. Came out in 2017. So it falls right within that category of being old enough.
Yeah.
Because we're picking books that aren't relative. There's a lot of great books that are new, guys. Trust me, there's a lot. And we chose books that have been out for a few years that have lasted at least one Olympics. So this works pretty well. So.
Yeah. And on the personal side of this, again, I said, I work for Brendon, but for those of you that have known me or followed me over the years, like I've had my own company since really 2005, right? So for 16 years, I haven't had a boss. And it took a lot of, thought and decision-making, that kind of stuff. I was hired as a consultant to come in and kind of turn this app around that we were creating that wasn't going well, and we needed to turn it around. And I was concerned because you and I know a lot of these people in these circles, Paul. And one of the things that I always watch for is the onstage, offstage personality. We've talked about it. There's an onstage person, and then there's an offstage person. And you've heard stories of that, like people that you've reveled or really were inspired by, and you find out that they're not that same person behind the scenes. And so I got an opportunity for several months to work side by side with Brendon before I just made the decision to come work for him, to evaluate that. And we've even had heart-to-hearts, Brendon and I, that authenticity is so key to me. If there's somebody I'm going to follow, I need to know that they're their authentic selves, that what they're saying. And I can tell you that whether it's a one-on-one meeting with me, whether it's a all hands meeting with the company, the leadership team meeting, whatever, Brendon shows up with the same energy. He's the same dude on stage as he is off stage. And I find that to be really rare. So excited to be there. But let's get into some of the takeaways here. And, he's got 6 high performance habits. And the first one is seek clarity. But to break that one down, there's something he does. And he actually, if you ever see Brendon live, and Brendon coaches like Oprah. He did this with Oprah. Oprah did this piece. But you basically take 3 inspirational words that you value, and you get to choose them. But what he talks about is these 3 words become the checkpoints in his life. Every night, it's almost like taking what we talk about Think and Grow Rich and our mantra, right? And you create your mantra, and you're supposed to say that in the evening and say that in the morning when you wake up. This is the same thing, but they're 3 inspirational words. He actually tells you to program them as alarms in your phone, so that randomly a word will pop up or something will pop up just to remind you. His is live, love, and matter, which I love. And everywhere you see Brendon, you'll see those words. But when you start talking about clarity, you pick 3 words that are really, really important to you, that really define who you are. Not phrases, not quotes, 3 words. And that becomes your guiding light. And that, when we start talking about clarity, that's as clear and concise as you can get.
Yeah, I love, the six habits are fantastic, right? So real quick for all our listeners and viewers, Rick's talking about the first habit, which is seeking clarity. And I want to unpack that some more, but just so that everybody who's taking notes, just so you know what they are real quick. Can I do this, Rick? Can I just share the 6?
Yeah, knock it down. Yeah.
6, seek clarity is number 1. Number 2 is generate energy. I love that one. Number 3 is raise necessity. And these are all personal, right? And then he moves to a social aspect. Okay, that's personal. That's you. You're being intentional and you're growing. This is what you're going to do. And then the next 3 are kind of social. Like, okay, this is intentional in what you do with your interactions with other people. We talked about adversaries and allies last week. So this is going to kind of play into that too. But all 6 of these play into it, by the way. It's really beautiful. So the next 3 are increase productivity, develop influence. There it is. We talked about influence last week. And then demonstrate courage. And I love that. So those are the 6 high performance habits. And these are legit, guys. I love it. And I love those 3 words: live, love, matter. I love the story behind it. Love those questions that he has at the end of the day. Did I live fully today? Did I love fully today? Did I matter fully today? Powerful questions. But I like your little exercise. That's pretty cool. So is that, you kind of set that on your, like every hour kind of thing?
Just he sets random alarms but he uses that, quite a bit for your goals and all that kind of stuff. But what's really key about this is this is all derived from studying people who are high performers, right? Yeah. So this isn't just like, and a lot of the books that we read, and they're profound, they're great, but they're like, oh, this is what I've discovered. This is like interviewing, hundreds of thousands of people and then segmenting them into high performers and non-high performers and studying what are the things that they do, not who they are, how they react, what do they do that's different than the non-performers, non-high performers. And and the whole point and the key too is habit, creating a habit that leads you to high performance. For instance, and this one's if we start talking about number 2, which is generate energy. When they really started to dive into what was happening, they said there was a stunning finding in this. It says a stunning finding from our research on over 20,000 high performers is that the top 5% of all high performers are 40% more likely to exercise at least 3 days a week than the 95% below them. So if you want to join the top ranks of success in life, it's time to take exercise seriously. Now, we talked about, my weight loss journey, but I started going to Orange Theory Fitness 3 times a week, right? And that's led to more and more exercise. But my first commitment, that first habit that I set was going Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. I go to the gym. And the drastic improvement in my life, not only in health and in mental and all the other stuff from just doing that one habit. I concur with this research. So when we start talking about some of the findings in this book, it's looking for those little habits that are big ones, but those little things, those one change items that you can make in your life at a time that can have drastic improvement on your performance.
One of the things I do, Rick, you know this, when we do our podcast, I keep a notebook next to me, a pen. I write stuff down because we drop little golds here from the book itself and from the sharing that you have and our guests. And, I encourage folks, capture your thoughts. The most important thoughts are the ones that you have as you listen, as you watch this. Here's one thought that hit me, Rick, as you shared this. This is like a modern day Think and Grow Rich, isn't it?
It is.
This is, Napoleon Hill, he interviewed and studied, I don't know how many different countless influential leaders, high performance guys and gals. This is the modern day version of that book. It's not Think and Grow Rich is a book in itself. So I'm not trying to say that this is just this replace it. No, that's a good book, but this is a very, very profound book. And I'm disappointed in myself that I haven't read it sooner.
Well, what I like about Think and Grow Rich, to me, identifies the aspects that they had that other people didn't, right?
Yeah.
But it didn't necessarily, there were some things in it that you could do. Like, again, the mantra is something I did right away, and the persistence, and it talks about the traits, but it didn't necessarily provide that framework of creating it as a habit.
Yeah, and the practical stuff to start to apply.
And so this it's a comparison book. So I think Think and Grow Rich is something you read first, then you read this book, because they do go hand in hand. I think that's a great call out, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Yeah. This whole thing on clarity, one of my takeaways, I talked about the live, love, matter thing, which you mentioned, which is really profound. I mean, think about this, guys. We'll start with this is a pre-tip and challenge. If you make that the end of the day kind of question, and the inquiry that you have of yourself, did I live fully today? Did I love? Did I matter? That's going to really impact you. And I love this backstory behind this, right? He was in a car accident, right?
Yeah.
You want to share that story real quick?
Yeah, he actually, and he tells the story often, but he was a young man. He just lost the love of his life, and he was actually contemplating suicide. And had gotten this work program and went there, and it was honestly thinking about ending his life. And he gets into this car accident, and that's where these words came from. He started going, have I lived? Have I loved? Have I mattered?
Yeah.
And he just, some of his early stuff, if you start to read him, was choose the joy. And he does. I watch him do that, every day and bring this energy. But one of the things he said, this was in a meeting with us, but I'm sure he said it on stage as well, is, he was like, this life thing is pretty okay. Like, he's thinking about ending his life, and then he nearly gets his life ended for him.
Yeah.
And he's like, wait a minute, this life thing's pretty cool. This life thing's all right. And just made different decisions from that point forward. It's really, really a profound story. But interestingly enough too, though, he had another accident. He had an ATV accident as well that he ended up damaging his brain as he was writing his first book. And our friend, Dr. Amen, is somebody that he counseled and worked with and learned, but he had never had any kind of arguments with his wife, Denise, or anything like that. And then all of a sudden, after this traumatic brain injury, he started going to anger and he had to reteach himself a lot of different things through this. So just a really compelling backstory of who Brendon is. Yeah,
so good. I love the stories in here. This idea of clarity. So this is one of my takeaways as well. And you talked about clarity in envisioning the future for. That really hit me, right? The future for is your future self, right? And I'll unpack a little bit of this. I want you to share your thoughts. Self, the for, right? Self, social, skills, service. Okay. And self is like high performers. He says high performers can articulate their future with greater ease than others. I'm like, okay, that's cool. Let me write that one down. High performers can articulate their future with greater ease than others. Social. High performers have clear intentions about how they want to treat other people. This gets back to what we talked about last week with adversaries and allies, right? Have clear intentionality and clear intentions of how we're going to treat other people, right? Live, love, matter. Skills. High performers are very clear about the skill sets they need to develop on how to win in the future. And I love this idea of PFIs. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Primary field of interest. What's your primary field of interest? Have one. And then fourth one, service. High performers look to tomorrow and consider their service to the world. Very powerful. Then he says, kind of as a wrap up on this topic of clarity, at least in my notes, when someone becomes disconnected from their future and their contribution to it, they underperform. But when someone is connected to their future and their contributions to it, they're high achievers. They're high achievers. So I think that's really powerful.
And to your point, that's all clarity.
Yeah.
If you're mulling through not knowing what next year looks like or what your next move looks like, and he even talks about, getting to your five, right? He talks about these 5 things. So if you want to know, what your next dream is, and I think that actually comes a little bit later when he's talking about increasing, productivity. But if there were only 5 major moves to make your next goal happen, what would they be? So the point is so many people get stuck going, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if that happens? And I've shared, my coaching style with people that I work with of, sometimes I'll tell them, all right, let's write them all down. And then let's go see what actually really happens. And you'll realize you've spent so much time in the what ifs, and the thing that did occur was not even on the list. So no matter how much time you sit there and try to say, why can't I do something, you still won't get all the things that could happen versus what are the 5 things I'm actually going to do? What are and there's that clarity of purpose. So you know what tomorrow looks like,
Yeah.
what that next move is. So charting your 5 moves is a huge piece.
I love it. Love it.
One thing that just hit me too, Paul, is as you were saying things, I've heard John Maxwell talk about that. I've heard Seth Godin talk about that. I've heard Dan Pink talk about that. But those are all high performers.
Yes.
So the fact is these are high performing habits, right? So you hear John talking about being intentional, living intentionally. Well, that means I'm actually going to think about tomorrow. I'm thinking about how I want to show up. I'm thinking about what energy I want to bring to it. Brendon talks about your A game, right? Bringing your A game. What is my A game? Have I even been bringing that today? And what would my A game look like in the next hour or so? That's the same thing as John talking about the intentionality and looking at his agenda and thinking into how he can bring value to those to that next meeting. Well, these aren't just people regurgitating other ideas. This is their take and conclusion of it, but they're all doing it and they're all high performers, which just supports high performing habits.
Yeah, I love that. I'm looking through my notes on this book as you're sharing that, because there's so many great highlights. I'm a Kindle guy. I love having the print. I have the print on this book that I need to find out of a box because I put it away. I'm like, no, I'm not going to read it. I'm gonna have this book on my shelf now, right? I put books on my shelf that I think are meaningful. This one is definitely meaningful. The other tip are these traps that he talks about, right? And I wish we had more time to dive into it, but he says the 3 traps is beware of superiority, beware of dissatisfaction, and beware of neglect. And those were like, okay, get it, right? And you can see this in others, right? You can see when a leader falls off the treadmill, if you will. I'll use that vernacular. If they're a high performer, but all of a sudden they're not that high performer anymore, what happened? Well, maybe there was an air of superiority that they had. Maybe, and this has happened to me, Rick, is dissatisfaction. Beware of dissatisfaction. And then this one happens a lot. All of us have experienced this, right? Neglect. Beware of neglect. Those are 3 traps. So, and it comes back to where he started, right? Think about, did I live full today? Did I love? Did I matter? So I love those traps.
Yeah, I think neglect is the one that hit me the most, because when you start thinking about neglect, it's what am I neglecting? So when you fall off that treadmill, it's because you're getting into a pattern of distraction.
Yes.
So there's something distracted you, family issue, whatever, and then you just started going through the motions, and you're neglecting your dream. You're neglecting that sense of purpose. And sometimes because you're into a woe is me type of phase, you're neglecting the service aspect of it. We've talked many times about our servant hearts and wanting to serve people and having to serve people. And, even if we talk about this podcast, we talked, I think last week when we were done, I said, man, I miss the energy, because we took a little bit of a break over the summer, but I neglected the learning during that the habit that I had of being prepared for the podcast, the habit that I had of being ready to have personal stories and things like that relate to the material that we're doing. I realized how much I was neglecting that side when we got back into this. Because again, when we're done with this today, man, I'm going to be on fire. I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go do my stuff. But it was just interesting is that we stopped a habit that you and I had, which is to get together and record and podcast. And that habit alone, all of a sudden I started to detract. I wasn't reading as much. I wasn't growing as much because I didn't have the habit with you,
And now we've put some pressure on us, right? 16 books are like
16 books. 16 books in 16.
This is guys, we're challenging ourselves on this one, right? What are your 16 books, right? So think about what we're going through, and it's humbling, but I'm hungry for it, and I love what we do, and I love to be able to share with our listeners and viewers on this. So it's a lot of fun.
So I have another takeaway around influence. We talk about influence all the time, right?
Yeah.
And leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. But he had a different, a little bit of a different take that at least made me think for a second. He says, you can't possibly know whether you have influence with your coworkers unless you ask them to do something. He says, several replicated studies show that people tend to say yes over 3 times as often as people thought they would. So he shares this research with them. So if someone does say yes to helping you, they tend to like you even more after they've done something for you. People don't grudgingly help you, right? If they didn't want to, they'd probably say no. So the takeaway here is if you want more influence, ask for help.
Ooh.
And ask often.
That's good. That's good. And we could do that. And I think he quotes Cialdini in this book, either this one or the last one. He talks about influence, Robert Cialdini, but the will question, that's one of the more powerful things that you can do to frame, to ask somebody to help you. Like, hey, will you just take a minute and help me out with this? Will you just give me some time when you have a chance to kind of review this? Will you? The will statement in the front, because people love to support and encourage others, and when they feel like, wow, that person's asking me to help them out, that means they must value my contributions. And so think about how it is when you receive that, when somebody says, hey, Rick, will you just take a minute to kind of look through this thing and just give me your thoughts on this? I really value your opinion. You've got a perspective that I think is really meaningful for me and for all of us. Can you share that? That's pretty powerful, right, Rick? When you get those kind of will questions.
And that is a Cialdini thing. It's replacing can with will.
Yeah.
So can you take a second? You're like, I don't know if I can or not. Can I? Right? When you're
yeah.
But will you is and again, we talk about these one word switches all the time. But you're right, that will you piece. And my final kind of takeaway in this was around the demonstrating courage. And what he says is courage is more like a skill since anyone can learn it. And once you understand and demonstrate it more consistently, everything changes. He says, if your future best self, a version of you 10 years older, who is even stronger, more capable, and more successful than you imagine yourself to be, showed up on your doorstep today and looked at your current circumstances, what courageous action would that future self advise you to take right away to change your life? How would your future self tell you to live? I thought that was awesome.
That's good. That's good. Do you remember, it reminds me of Back to the Future, when Marty McFly goes back and, his dad wasn't really the coolest cat in the neighborhood. And he's struggling. He goes back and, he's seen the future. This is Marty McFly. Who's the actor? I'm trying to remember the actor who played Marty McFly.
Michael J. Fox.
Yeah, Michael J. Fox. And classic movie. And so he pretty much coaches his dad to see the future self. And sure enough, when he goes back in time, back to the present, dad's a different guy. He's a cool cat now. So
that's right. That's right.
So tip and challenge, you ready for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
So for tip and challenge for here, this one was a hard one for me to do, and I'm practicing it more and more. A lot of people talk about meditation or just taking a few minutes and clearing your headspace, and there's a lot of great apps for that. And I did that for a while, but I didn't have it wasn't working as well for me, just because my goal was to meditate. But I didn't have a clear intention behind that. I was like, oh, meditation is supposed to help. I'm going to meditate. But Brendon teaches a technique, and he talks about in this book too, around the generating energy. Yeah. And so I ask myself these questions now during a meditative session. Instead of meditating for 20, 30 minutes in the morning, which is what I was trying to do, it's really about each transition moment is what we talk about. I'm about to transition. So I'm in a status meeting, and now I've got to transition and go into a team meeting, or, I've got to transition to a customer meeting or whatever. And the questions are, what energy do I want to bring into this next activity? So it's more of a 3 to 5 minute as I master these transition moments.
Yeah.
How can I do this next activity with more excellence? And how can I enjoy the process? And so that's my tip is to make sure you do that. Now, challenge, I'm going to go 1,000% selfish on this, but there's an app out there called Growth Day. It is something that I actually am the project manager for and working on it every day. It's what I started. It was the big project that we were kind of referencing, in the podcast before when, Mike Harbour would go, well, Rick's working on something, but we can't really tell you what it is. That's what it was. It was Growth Day. Phenomenal app. You can get a 14-day free trial to go out there, but it has all of the tools to help you through the high-performing habits. So out of the Institute, there's something called a life score that happens, and there's daily, weekly, and monthly life scores that actually measure yourself against these 6 high-performing habits. And what's different with this app than most is after you score that, there's direct recommendations of content, audio, video, reading materials, that kind of stuff on a score that maybe, that you didn't do so well on. Maybe you were low in energy this week. Maybe you were low in demonstrating courage this week. It'll say, hey, here's some, activities or guidelines or things to help you improve that score for the next week. So beyond just taking a survey, like, I love DISC and everything else, but once you kind of taken the survey and you've read the coming back to how we launched this podcast, but what do I do with that information? How do I change the next piece? What's my next step? This app does it. It gives you the ability to journal, do your life scores. There's challenges to help you develop the habits. So there's like 7-day sleep challenges. There's mental health challenge, all these cool little challenges in there, and a tremendous amount of content. We're talking Brian Tracy, Wayne Dyer. We have Growth Day coaches, which is like Dave Hollis, Anthony Trucks, Jamie Kern-Lima, all these people that are doing live events every Tuesday and Thursday. And then all the replays are available as well. So phenomenal app. So you can go to growthday.com and try that out. That's my challenge.
Love it. Worth that challenge. And I'm glad to be plugged into that environment. It's such a great tool. So here's my tip and challenge, Rick. And I love this discussion today. One of the things you kind of talked about this early on is, and I'm pulling right from Brendon's book. He says, identify 3 aspirational words that would describe your future self. That exercise, I was like, whoa, that's powerful, right? What are 3 aspirational words that would describe your future self? If you could describe, basically he says this, if you could describe yourself in just 3 aspirational words that sum up who you are at your best in the future, what would those words be? So that's the challenge. Identify those 3 words. Take time today, right now, just to sit down and say those 3 words are, and I'm going to be doing the same exercise right after we're done with this podcast. I'm going to identify my 3 words, and those are my words going forward. I already have an inkling of what they are, and I'll share on the next podcast those 3 words. So Rick, on the next podcast, you get to call me out. Paul, what are those 3 aspirational words that you have? But think about it from this standpoint as far as the challenge. What would provide the most value to those you serve? As you think through those 3 words, what will provide the most value to those you serve? Because those are the words that you want to kind of pick that, hey, you know what, this is going to add a lot of value. That's the question high performers obsess about. And again, this is straight from Brandon stuff. They obsess about it. And I love that take. And I love this book. Thank you again, Rick, for bringing this out. And I want to encourage our folks to go to breakingaverage.com. Check us out on the web. We'll highlight this book, reference the Growth Day that Rick just mentioned. You'll see a link for that to go sign up. Or just go to growthday.com, right, Rick?
Yeah, growthday.com.
That's pretty simple too. So breakingaverage.com, growthday.com. Go check us out there. Just a reminder that breaking average isn't something, it's just small steps. And we talk about habits, and these are small steps that we can do to make a bigger impact going forward. So Rick, any final thoughts as we close this out?
Yeah, I'll give you my 3 words.
Yeah.
So my 3 words are finish. And the reason being is with my high ADD and high I personality, I tend to start a lot of things, but not finish. So did I finish something today? Did I finish what I intended to finish today? Right. So finish. Nice. Inspire. So did I take, time out to with my family or, with friends or anybody to to create a moment of inspiration for them to grow, for them to be challenged, and serve, right? Making sure that, who did I serve today? How did I serve today? Did I serve with pure intentions? Those are the 3 words that I use.
I love it. I can't wait to share my 3 at the next podcast. We'll tease it up, I guess, for the next one. I love Brendon's as well, right? Live, love, matter. Rick's is finish, inspire, serve. So thank you, Rick. Guys, thank you for watching and listening to the Breaking Average podcast. We're so thankful for each of you. And we hope that you're enjoying these little bits as we unpack some phenomenal books. Join us next time as we dive into another fantastic book. I can't wait to share that with you. And so we'll see you next time on the Breaking Average podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Breaking Average podcast. If you loved what you heard, please take a moment to subscribe. All opinions and comments expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and do not reflect the opinions or views of any of the advertisers, producers, or platforms. This show was produced by R2 Multimedia. A special thank you to Milestone Melodies for our theme music. As you continue your day, what is one action that you can apply from this podcast to your life? Tune in for our next episode as we continue to challenge everyone to break average.